Guys, what's up? What's going on? It's your boy RJ Game News USA here, and back today with another game review. And today we're going to go over the review scores for 1348X Voto, which, for those of you who don't know, the game is basically woke garbage. And they also made this big old lie that they had 250,000 people added to their wish list. But yet, according to Steam, only about 400 people are playing this game right now. So if you like this kind of content, like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. This is not quite an angry rant, but it may get a little spicy. So, X Voto, which I'm sure will get, because it is woke, will get protected a little bit by games journalists. It's got a 54 overall on Metacritic. Not good. That's only based off 12 reviews. However, the user scores really tell the story. The user scores are sitting at a 1.1. I gotta say, guys, I've done this for a while now, and I gotta say, I don't know of many user scores at all, that are this freaking low. A 1.1 for user scores. Holy shit. Well, before we get to the user scores, though, let's see what the critics had to say. So, first of all, there's one positive review, 9 mixed, and 2 negative. So, we're going to start off with the one positive here from the Games Machine that gave it an 80, saying, if you're willing to forgive a certain amount of roughness and basic combat system, 1348X Voto will take you on a pleasant journey through medieval Tuscany, lasting 5 or 6 hours, depending on your patience with exploration. I'm not a keen observer, so I missed a lot of upgrades, but I still enjoyed the game. What? How is that an 80? How is a game like this, that's 5 or 6 hours long, an 80? Okay, let's read some more competent reviews, shall we? Games Radar Plus with a 60 said, X Voto starts with a wealth of potential and unfortunately manages to squander it at every turn, creating a hollow, rage-inducing, and disappointing experience, which, with its beautiful depiction of Italy and talented performers, being its only saving graces. Just play Assassin's Creed 2 then. Tech Radar Gaming with a 60 says, despite awful PC performance dragging down the gorgeous visuals, X Voto excels at offering satisfying sword combat in an enjoyable bite-sized adventure. However, as a whole package, it wasn't able to keep me interested in the story that I would otherwise love had there been more time spent developing its central relationship. Yeah, let's hear more about that. Game Mag with a 60 says 1348X Voto is a rough around the edges, that's saying the least, project that still manages to be engaging. With a bigger budget and proper polish, it could have stood alongside Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, and A Plague Tale Innocence. But that didn't happen. And guys, I'll be honest, I didn't even like Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, and I didn't even like Plague Tale Innocence all that much. I'm telling you, those games run circles around this shit, from what I've seen. We have a 58 from COG Go Connected saying, 1348X Voto joins games like A Plague's Tale and Kingdom Come Deliverance and giving players a slice of medieval life. Unlike those titles, X Voto is a short time commitment with a relatively simple story and unique character dynamics. If the world weren't so quite barren and the combat were less frustrating, X Voto's attractive environments could be the foundation of a special little game. So, we're getting almost a marathon treatment with this, where, gee whiz, we love the art style, but we're going to forgive awful gameplay. Yeah. No thank you. This game might be worse than Marathon. I haven't tried it. I don't plan on trying it. But who knows? This could actually be the worst game of the year. Multiplayer.it gave it a 55. They didn't leave a specific review. IGN Italia, which is interesting because this is an Italy-based game, gave it a 50, saying despite its fascinating 14th century Italian setting and combat system inspired by real historical martial arts, Ex Voto collapses under the weight of its own ambition. The rushed narrative, clunky and repetitive gameplay loop, jarringly empty environments, and a severe lack of technical polish overshadow the undeniable passion of the small development team. It's a great game with great potential that sadly bites off more than it can chew, leaving players with a frustratingly unrefined, buggy experience. I think that review really sums it up very well. Really does. But that doesn't even cover like the woke shit involved in this. And until we get to the user reviews, we probably won't even hear about the woke shit involved in this. But it's woke beyond belief, on top of just being a bad game. Game Reactor UK with a 50 says, all in all, I must admit I did not really enjoy Ex Voto. The game often feels like it's actively working against the player rather than inviting them into the experience. The lack of settings, the uneven sound balance, and the rather monotonous gameplay make it all feel more frustrating than engaging. It's a shame, really, because the period is interesting, and the idea of following a female knight through plague-ridden Italy could have been the starting point of something really exciting. But in its current form, Ex Voto is difficult to recommend. Perhaps some patches could improve the experience in the long run, but as the game stands right now, I simply don't have much fun with it. I think that's a pretty honest review, too. We have a 50 from the gamer, who says, not enough time is spent with the characters to sympathize with their plight. While the narrative itself discordantly jumps between several themes without committing to a singular vision, it's not helped by a middling combat system and exploration that is too simplistic and predictable for its own good. As a queer woman, I'm delighted that games like this exist, but I can't bring myself to ignore the fatal flaws that hold the passionate effort back from greatness. Listen, I gotta be honest. I actually have to commend the reviewer at The Gamer. I felt like this was a professional, honest review, and even admitting, yo, I'm queer, I know it's woke, I still think the game sucks. Let's give this person a clap. Let's give this person a round of applause for not white knighting for total absolute crap. At least they're honest and they say, look, I want woke games, but they need to be good. You know what I mean? Sector.sk with a 50 says 1348 Ex Voto is an interesting game with a great atmosphere, but it has a lot of problems. Its strongest point is its gloomy mood of the medieval world, which draws the player into a plague-ridden environment. However, the title suffers from technical shortcomings and repetitive combat in an empty world. Vandal with a 50, which seems to be the most common score for this game, says, ultimately, it's a shame that such an interesting premise, is it interesting, resulted in the game we have before us today. An adventure we started with enthusiasm, but which, long before the credits rolled, already felt like a burden. It wouldn't have solved all the problems, but we believe that with a few more months of development, some of the significant presentation flaws could have been corrected. It's a game that aims to stand out for its graphics, its atmosphere, its story, and its combat, and it stumbles in all of them. Well, then you're not going to get a very good fucking review, right? Speaking of not a very fucking good review, we're down to the negatives. The first by DualShockers with a 40, saying there are good ideas in 1348 Ex Voto, but they're undercut by the shoddy implementation of the systems. The voice cast carries the game, with several amazing performances woven throughout. Unfortunately, the whole experience is a letdown by a variety of glitches, fundamental design flaws with the combat, confusing levels, and several jarring story transitions that make it seem like 1348 Ex Voto was shoved out the door before it was ready. Amen. Amen there. And finally, the last review got a 30 from Game & Mobile that says, It does sadden me that the game turned out this way, as I fear a dark corner of the internet will use the game's negative reception to push an unwarranted agenda. Namely, the game's failure is tied to the assumed relationship of two female leads, which of course is not the case. It's difficult to overlook 1348X Voto's flaws, though. While there are some claiming performances on a display, it's ultimately let down by a dull and problematic combat system and poor optimization that doesn't really give you any incentive to push on with what it is. Sadly, a slog. And you know what? This person here gave the worst review of all the critics, but they're also the only one that actually brought up the woke part of the game, with the female lesbian relationship being the central theme of it. But yet they wanted to make clear, absolutely clear, that it being woke had nothing to do at all for why the game didn't succeed. Let me explain something, okay? The game not selling well is because it's woke more than the technical problems. Because people buy good games all the time that have technical problems, or games with narratives they agree with that aren't woke all the time, even with technical problems. Not saying the technical problems didn't hurt the sales. The wokeness hurt the sales. The fact the game was bad hurt the reviews. The fact that it's both is why both a bad game and a woke game is why the user scores are in the fucking toilet. So let's go look at those user scores, shall we? For 1348X Voto. And yeah, 127 users. And it's got a 1.1. So even if there's one white knight to come in there and try to give it a 10, there's 9 more people giving it a fucking 0. So let's read a few of these. We're not going to be too long on this. But we have a 0 here from June Cognit 00, who said, buggy game with terrible facial animations that honestly remind me of Gollum. Remember that game? The combat system is catastrophic. The gameplay is generic and repetitive, and the story is painfully boring. Okay. Another 0 from Parapandal88Y, who says it's not realistic because the main character is a lesbian woman knight with a bowl cut. Yes. Thank you. It's not about, oh, we're against lesbians in games. We're against going against historical accuracies and pretending like it's okay. When it's not. That's not what went on in medieval times. That's ridiculous. And it's presenting itself as if it's a, real historical game. And that's the fucking problem. And this guy called it out for it. There's another review on here that's a 7. It's a long review. I'm sure it's a very thoughtful review because it's not just a 0 or a 10. But I'm not going to read it. I'm sorry, whoever wrote that. We have another 0 here from Harwar Nari, who said, disgusting game, disgusting developers, I hope they burn in hell, disgusting game. Okay. Wow. Dillhole McRib with a 0 said, that's right, teenage lesbian kills hundreds of men, 3 times her size easily, of course. Yes, that's another thing to bring up. How does a lesbian with a bowl cut in medieval times just rip through hardened knights in medieval times? It doesn't make sense. That's what makes the game woke. It makes it less believable. Locker22 with a 0 said, one of the worst games released. Another shame for an Italian video game sector. An ass story with horrible hitboxes, bad graphics, very disappointing ending, and a lot of very bad animations. Everything financed indirectly by the Italian people through taxes. Don't buy it. It's really that bad. I didn't even touch on this. The Italian government helped fund this game. The Italian government funded a woke piece of shit game that nobody bought. That is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Another 0 here from Steph86, who says another game full of crazy propaganda from insane left-wing incels. These activists have no creativity whatsoever. Based. We have a 0 from Captain Hero 89 saying even playing the game Gollum would be more fun for me than playing this pile of shit. We have another 0 here from Luca1998010, who says, where are those 250,000 wish listed, huh? Ex-Voto devs. Peaked under 500 players on Steam, and even with that number that played the game, they were just there to make fun of the game. This is what happens when you go ahead and attack another game studio developer for not bending the knee to identity politics. Knight's Path devs have every right to flex on top of the grave of the abomination once their game gets the success it deserves. Then we have, this will be the last one I read. Bruh 702 with a 0 says, go woke, go broke. Can't wait for Night Path to come out and show that not every game needs to try to focus on the modern audience or add politics to it and just make a game for the gamers that they want. Let's go, Night's Path. Couldn't have said it better myself. I think that about sums it up, guys. You got a game that's buggy, a game that's crappy, a game that isn't good, and it's woke. It's got awful reviews. It has very low players. We'll forget about it in about a week. Anyway, guys, that concludes this going over the review scores for 1348 Ex-Voto. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, this is your boy RJ signing out. Have a good one.